Change of locations today because, of course, the moment I went to film, and it is later in the day, the light in my bedroom went out and I don't have any bulbs to replace it, so we're out in my living space. And we're going to talk about Dementors. God, what I find interesting is Rowling's very smart about this, because she does not actually tell us about the Dementors until we meet the thing, and then we get the information sort of following it. Prior to this point, everyone simply referred to them as the guards of Akzaban, or the Akzaban guards. We've never actually been informed that the guards of Akzaban are anything but human. But the Dementors certainly are. Which is interesting, because you want to know exactly where we don't find them. And I checked. This book came out a full 2 years after Prisoner of Azkaban was already out. And there's no Dementors in sight. I've checked multiple times. So, what that's communicating is that they're not necessarily beasts. But the fact that we're not seeing the Dementors in this book guaranteed came out after Prisoner of Azkaban tells us that Dementors aren't necessarily being considered beasts in this moment. So we do have two other categories in which we could put them that we need to explore. The two we have, of course, are the spirit division and the being division, if they're not falling into that beast category. Now with the spirit division, as close as we can tell from what Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them are telling us in their introduction, it seems to be purely ghosts. And I'm not sure if we can fit Dementors in here, because I've been doing some research on the Harry Potter wiki, and most of what I'm reading, of course, is actually very well referenced, using not just the books, but the greater canon that Rowling's provided. And I came across the fact that Dementors can't make ghosts. If your soul is sucked out by a Dementor, you can't actually become a ghost because your soul is gone. So I'm not really sure we could fit them into the spirit division, because it becomes this weird cannibalistic type thing going on. And the thing we don't have proof of in this moment is that they were ever different creatures beyond this point. The greater canon history that I was actually reading about is that this island appeared out of nowhere, believably after the death of the wizard that was on the island, who was luring muggles to it and killing them. And the island showed up, and they sent wizards to it, and they discovered the Dementors there. And everybody freaked out. So we don't actually know how the Dementors, if they were created from humans, except the fact that Rowling has stated they don't breed, but they grow like fungus, which tells me they weren't created by humans, which tells me they could not, by that definition, fit into the spirit division, because they weren't some other being that then became a spirit, which is how the spirit division and the ghosts are defining themselves. They're have-beens, which to have been something, you had to have been something else and then become. So that knocks out two categories. They're not in the beasts, apparently, and they're not in the spirits, which means we place them in the being category. And I think that's going to frighten a lot of us. But we have to actually take a look at everything we're seeing. One, they certainly seem to be able to communicate well enough. The final definition for being that we have is the ability to understand and help contribute to the laws of the magical community. And as close as I can tell, the Dementors do that. They're certainly helping contribute to the law. They're acting as the guards for the prison, for everyone that's broken the laws. They certainly seem to understand how to communicate, because we're actually told that Arthur tells Molly that the Akzaban guards were the ones that told Fudge that Sirius was talking in his sleep. And up to this point in time, we have no proof that there are any guards but Dementors on site. So they've apparently got to be able to communicate. We learn in a later book that they've also apparently buried the bodies of prisoners. So they have to actually understand how all of this functions. They can apparently understand commands well enough that you've got them guarding places. Not really well, we'll learn very quickly. They don't really like obeying that command too much. But they've been sent into a space with children and are apparently at least expected to understand enough not to just go on a rampage. So, yeah, I think by that definition we do in fact have to place them in the being category. Why does this scare us is the next question. Well, I think the big one is simply the fact that they feed off of us. On a small scale and on a big scale. Big scale, of course, being the Dementors' kiss. They could literally suck at our souls. But the small scale of this even presence of them, just sucking the happiness and hope and life out of everyone, that's frightening. And it's certainly meant to be. Rowling has admitted that she designed the Dementors off her own encounters with depression. In fact, the Dementors have helped me with my own depression by simply allowing me to visualize it in a way and try and fight it from there, to try and figure out my own Patronus. So they're not meant to be like fluffy little bunnies, like, oh, those aren't scary. This is meant to be a terrifying thing. But I think one of the most scary aspects of it is the fact that we have to look at the Dementors and say, yes, in some ways they are to be afforded the same rights and responsibilities as the rest of us being groups. If you look at it carefully, there are some groups that have actually rejected that idea. The Centaurs, for one. I believe the Mer people are the other group that have actually rejected being status because of this issue of who, by those definitions, is actually included and who's excluded. But the thing we can't do is allow that to gain control of us. Because any group of beings or people could be a danger to us. There are always going to be bad apples within every group. But you can't go around life looking at just everyone on the street wondering how they can hurt you. You have to have some trust in the goodness of personhood in that moment. And I think that's what frightens us the most, is we can't even see that possibility with the Dementors, simply because of the way they are. You can't have trust in them simply because they're designed to remove that from you. Totally. You can't have hope that they're good things when they take hope from you. So I think either we have to admit that our definitions of being right now are lacking in some ways, or at least need some firmer categories, because can you really live alongside something that is just purely designed to destroy you? You can live with the possibility of that, but I'm not sure you can live with the total guarantee of it. And that's a terrifying, slippery slope to go down. Because the moment we exclude the Dementors, that opens the door for the exclusion of a whole lot of other groups that we don't necessarily agree with how they're living, that are different from us, that survive in different ways. And I think that's something that's a terrifying aspect. The Wizards are trying to work around this, of course, because they've incorporated the Dementors into the system of government in a way that, incarceration-wise, works. But there's certainly a lot of holes in that. Innocents getting thrown in. Hagrid and Sirius, of course. The fact that they actually can't quite tell, or don't necessarily care, if they have the correct prisoners, which we're going to see in the next book, because we actually have an escape prior to Sirius that no one's discovered. And they don't fully obey the rules that have been set to them. They attack Harry on the train. They attack an entire Quidditch tournament. They get sent out to attack Harry and his cousin on the streets. And then they just join up with Voldemort and his group simply because all they want is to be fed. And hey, you get more food outside of Azkaban than in, so yeah, just go roam the countryside. So the Dementors actually pose a really critical problem for us in both the system of government that we hold and the definition of person and being. And that's terrifying. But that's the Dementors. That is exactly what they do. They take any trust and hope and understanding that you have of yourself and those around you right out of you. An additional thing to go along with this is there are, of course, theories that have gone around with this series, because this series isn't just a children's book. You are allowed to theorize about it. And I'm not saying children don't, but as you're older you tend to get a little deeper into this tendency to theorize. And one of the big issues I have with this is why Harry gets affected so badly. And some people look at it and say, well, he had a really terrible childhood, and he has some really terrible memories, so the Dementors just descend on him. And some people have noticed this. He also has Voldemort in his head. Harry hears screaming, which he's then later to identify as likely hearing his mother get killed, which is his worst memory, which is what the Dementors do. But it's also probably the worst memory of Voldemort, because that is the full memory of him losing all his power. He kills the woman, he tries to kill a baby, and because the thing is, Harry was 1. And if you would like some proof that Harry doesn't remember his mother dying, Harry, Ron, and Hermione followed the rest of the school out onto a rough mud track where at least 100 stagecoaches awaited the remaining students. Each pulled Harry could only assume by an invisible horse, because when they climbed inside one and shut the door, the coach set off all by itself, bumping and swaying in procession. Harry can't see the Thestral. You see the Thestral when you see death. So if Harry is actually directly remembering the death of his mother, he should see the Thestral in this moment, but he does not until he sees Cedric Diggory's death the following year. Likely, it's again that memory attachment he has with Voldemort, and that's why the scream sticks out to him so much. It's not just him remembering it, because he wouldn't that clearly. It's Voldemort remembering it as well. Harry has two souls inside of him. Of course he's a bigger meal. We also see Ginny react very poorly. Well, Ginny was almost directly possessed with Voldemort herself. So it's actually not that big of a leap to see the connection between the two. Harry's still going to be affected more because he still has the soul inside of him. But Ginny's certainly feeling it too. Okay, so that makes my 2 videos for this weekend. Back to my normal schedule of 1 on Sundays next week. Until then, keep reading, and I will too. Bye.